Hungry Trilobyte podcast would like to start by acknowledging these fine conventions. The Hellmouth Con. The Hellmouth Convention is back, and it's hosting a spectacular event in the place of all places, Torrance High School, the shooting location for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Join us June 15th, 2024 for one day only. Proceeds benefit the Los Angeles LGBT Center and the Ron Glass Memorial Scholarship. Visit thehellmouth.org for details. SoonerCon 32. Oklahoma City's longest running premier pop culture convention returns June 21st through 23rd, 2024. Prepare for 3 days of cosplay, crafts, tabletop gaming, and legendary guests, all in the friendly town of Norman, Oklahoma. To give back to the community, fundraisers and a live charity auction will be held. Visit SoonerCon.com to reserve your membership. On tap today, we have Allison Rentz. How are you doing this afternoon?
I am doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to have you here. I enjoyed your book, Among the Wildflowers. It is something you just put out. It is a book in form, but is more of a journal. You're somebody who guides somebody through the process of answering questions about themselves, working through issues they might be having, with prompts in the book.
Yes, that's correct. So I guess let me give a little bit of background about myself and how I came to have this idea. So I've been in the mental health field as a licensed professional counselor for about 14 years now. And I actually decided I wanted to do like a side project because we don't really make a lot in the mental health field. I saw some TikToks or some reels about, how to make like passive income. And, of course, they made it seem really easy. Like basically, it was copywriting other people's work. And I was like, well, I'm not going to do that. One, I'm a perfectionist, but I have my own work ethic, and I also adhere to a code of ethics. And if I'm going to have my name on it and my signature on it, then I'm going to do a good job on this. So I started brainstorming, and I actually had a journal prompt, just one prompt that was based on Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And then I got to thinking, wow, I could do a whole book on that, just that, because it's its own huge theory and huge just entity in itself. And so I decided that would be the focus of the guided journal. So yeah, so that's how the idea for the book came about. And for a lot of people, they have a hard time just sitting down and journaling. When you ask them, hey, just write down how you're feeling, they don't know where to start. And I was always kind of one of those people too. So guided journal prompts, you can Google them. There's so many for all kinds of different topics. So that's another way this came about, was to give people actual prompts and topics to be guided by. So when you're feeling like, I don't know where to begin, but I know I want to process things, or I want to learn more about myself, then that gives you an outline for where to begin.
And when you're working through something in life, whether it's you feel it's something small or something big, a lot of times you get the advice to journal and you don't necessarily know why unless you've tried it. I know, for example, I had a journal that I did a couple years back now that it was about 2 years ago, and I benefited greatly from that because it really made me stop and think and answer specific questions about specific things on my mind. The person writing the journal couldn't have known that, but that it really benefited me to just actually stop thinking about five things at once, really answer one specific question, really tell one specific story.
So that sounds like you're saying that gets you kind of to slow down your thoughts, because a lot of
Yes.
times we're all over the place. They're racing, which is a lot of times what people deal with anxiety and things like that. So it sounds like that. Yeah. sounds like that was beneficial for you because it got you to slow those thoughts down and break them down and maybe see a pattern in them. Um, I know for me, I also deal with anxiety. I've learned through years of work how to kind of work backward. So I might be feeling anxious, or it feels like it comes out of nowhere, but I'm able to say, okay, what was going on right before I started feeling anxious? And there's something called cognitive behavioral therapy, and there's a thoughts, feelings, actions, or behaviors triangle. And usually I can say, okay, well, this thought popped up. And then that thought led to this other thought. And I can see this train of thought. In DBT, which is called dialectical behavioral therapy, that can be called a chain analysis. So, there's all kinds of different ways to do this, different names for it and different theories. But the more you do it, the more you practice, it almost becomes just part of how your brain works. You can start to see patterns. Okay, this is a trigger for me. And when I'm triggered, like I can be triggered when I get hot. So I always have a little fan in my purse because when I get hot, I start to get anxious. So, and then that might start leading to feelings of fear or um, thoughts of, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be trapped, or people are gonna see me freak out and I'm gonna make a scene. And and so it doesn't always start with a thought. It can start with something happening in your body, or you might be feeling scared about something, and then from there some thoughts pop up, or you start getting heart palpitations and things like that. So it's kind of cool to start seeing how all of it works together. And I think I mean, what you just said is proof of that. Like, journaling, whatever journal you decide to do, is a great tool for that. A lot of times when you work with someone, a therapist, they will have you track your thoughts. And there are apps for that too. And then from the thoughts, they'll have you track what you were feeling. They'll have you track what was going on. They'll have you track what behaviors you were doing. They'll have you track what was going on in your body. What I have found is so many people have no clue. They have no clue what's going on in their body. They might intellectually be able to say something, but then there's a disconnect from what's going on inside the body or with the emotion. So people might be able to say, hey, I'm emotionally intelligent, because they have an intelligence about it, but they don't have a connection with it, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And when I did my experiment 2 years ago, at the very beginning of the book, the author had said, don't be surprised if this drags up memories or experiences you don't remember having, or have buried so far down you haven't thought of in years. And I wouldn't say I was skeptical, but that wasn't really the experience I was expecting. And yet that was exactly what happened. You really do start to see how things get connected, and your brain does the work. You just have to give it the lubrication to get it done.
Definitely. And some people like there's something called EMDR, which is, I can never remember like it's eye movement desensitization. It's something to do with the rapid movement of your eyes and the bilateral stimulation. So that's a similar technique. It's the research says it's just faster than talk therapy, but basically you're rewiring the neural pathways that have caused, like when a trauma has happened. So let's say you have a trauma from like if you were in a neglectful home, or there was a lot of yelling, or emotional abuse and things like that. So anytime somebody, you might perceive them, they might not even be yelling, but they raise their voice, you tend to get triggered and you start feeling really anxious. So EMDR is a method that, the fewer sessions in talk therapy. It works for some people. I tried it for myself. I didn't really find it helpful because I think things just take time. You have to be willing to do the work, however you do it, whether it's through talk therapy or EMDR, whatever. And I mean, you have to think about it. those kind of things happen when you were 3, 4 years old, and now you're 40, 50. That's what, decades. Can't do the math that quickly in my head, but that's decades of wiring, neural pathways that you have to rewire. And I fully believe you can rewire them. I'm living proof. there's many
Sure.
people that are there's many people that are living proof of it. It's just their habits, their habit loops, and that takes a long time, but it does work. But it's hard work.
Well, let's talk about your book specifically, because I mean, I'm
Yeah.
a big fan of the idea of journaling, but you put together a really great package in Among the Wildflowers. Your analogy of the wildflower itself being, and don't let me put words in your mouth about your own book, but please, but you're basically saying that wildflowers are able to grow in the most difficult of circumstances. They're able to flourish despite everything that they have to deal with, and that people, even when they think that they're broken, they're used up, they have no way of moving forward, they have it within themselves to do that, and your book really tries to give them the tools.
Yes, I love wildflowers. They carry through the wind, or they carry on a bee, or they find ways to persevere and grow despite their circumstances. I mean, they can grow, like, I don't know if you've ever seen those like stock pictures online of a wildflower, like a wildflower, a daffodil, or something growing in the crack of concrete.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you think about everything that had to take place, a chain analysis, so to speak, for that daffodil to be able to sprout up in a little tiny crack of concrete. But they did that, and it's beautiful. Sometimes people look at weeds. I mean, I think weeds are pretty too. A lot of times weeds look like flowers, but weeds, wildflowers, all of that, we don't give them enough credit. But so I talk about like being wild and being free. Not wild as in what we think of being wild, like we're going to go out and get drunk and sleep with a bunch of people, that kind of wild, but being free to just be yourself, to live in the moment. Because we tend to, especially when we have past unmet needs or past traumas, things like that, that we've not dealt with, they keep us stuck, or they can keep us stuck. And then we're not wild and free, because we're stuck in those things that have held us back all of our lives. They can affect our relationships. We can repeat relationship patterns. We can be so afraid that we never try anything new. We stay in our same patterns, in our same comfort zones, because we're so terrified if we step out of that, something bad's going to happen, or we're going to get hurt. Then you can get into attachment, our attachment styles, which that starts as soon as you're conceived in utero. I mean, as you start developing, not like a teeny little seed, but all of that stuff affects us. So a little bit about Abraham Maslow and hierarchy of needs. He created this theory as a theory of motivation, basically saying that our needs, whether they're met or unmet, are what motivate us in life. So when your needs are not met, you are not going to be able to move forward and grow, or you're not going to be able to move forward and pursue other things in life. So he created a pyramid of these needs, with the base being the most basic needs, up all the way to the most top needs, which would be the growth needs. So, were you familiar with Maslow before
I was,
you?
yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm trying to find a picture of the book so I don't do this wrong. I've read it a million times, but you're always like, oh. So his original theory only had, so physiological is at the base. So think of like, we need food, we need water, we need air, and not just any water. We need clean water. I mean, think about Oregon Trail as little kids. If we drink the wrong water, we get dysentery. We need clean air, and think about how many worlds out there, or not worlds, but how many countries out there don't even have those basic needs. And so you're constantly, that's all you're focused on. We can think about food insecurity. We're not really saying homelessness anymore, but being unsheltered. Think about if you can't even get those basic needs met, how are you going to be able to move on to the next set of needs, which would be safety? So these are the original set of needs that he created. So after safety, then you have love and belonging, then you have esteem, then you have I'm trying to remember. I think he added cognitive later, and then aesthetic was added later, and then his final one was self-actualization. And then when he upgraded his model, he added transcendence. So there's a total of 8. So the first 4, which were physiological, safety, love and belonging, and esteem, are called deficiency needs. So those are needs that, if they're deficient, they're not being met, you're not going to be able to grow if they are in a deficit. So, the hope is that, you feel safe in your home. You might live in a sketchy neighborhood, or a neighborhood that's not safe, or your home might not be safe. You might have grown up in a home that wasn't safe. Or you might currently be in a home that's not safe if you're in a domestic violence situation. Love and belonging, that's just that basic need to feel loved, to feel accepted, to have family, to have friends. Um, I really think about this when it comes to LGBTQ plus people. Imagine a core part of who you are is rejected by your family. I mean, that's major abandonment stuff going on. So I had a point and then my brain went blank. I hate when that happens. But yeah, so those are kind of like your base needs. So if any of those weren't met growing up, you could live in a constant state of repeating patterns, out of fear that those needs, like, they might be met now, but they're like, think about the Great Depression. Like, my grandparents grew up in the Depression, so their patterns, you also have generational trauma, so they passed on their trauma from growing up in the Depression, and it was always like, you have to eat all your food. They passed that on to my mom and my grandma. So there was always this fear of not having enough food, because both my grandma and my grandfather on my mom's side, they grew up in farmer families. So there, you could definitely see that, especially on my grandma. My grandma, she very much had issues with food and her eating and stuff, and that carried on with her pretty much until her death. It was almost like hoarding the food. Any questions about those?
Well, I mean that makes a lot of sense, and I can relate to that for sure because first of all, I was in a family where you were expected to clean your plate. That was just what you were going to do, and if you didn't, you were either not appreciative of what you had, or you were wasteful, which was bad. And generally, if you were not going back for seconds, people started asking if something was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that, suddenly I'm looking at the kids we have now, and it's like, well, they're not really expected to clean their plates, and they're being told to make better food choices, which is good, but that's just a very different language than I was used to. And I'm just looking at, like, how did we go from within a generation being able to say, we can't just, hang the kids uh, mental well-being and the pulse of how they feel about life based on whether they're eating or not. And I
Right.
think that's a great development to make, and I'm kind of proud that we've kind of come that far.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and I remember the point I was going to make a minute ago, and then you were saying something, and I have ADHD, so my brain is very choo. If I don't say things as I'm thinking about them. But yeah, I with food is a big one, and I'll go back to the point I was going to make earlier because that one's right there on my brain.
Please.
I've worked a lot. So when I first started working in the field, I worked with children and adolescents. So most of the majority of my experience has been with children, adolescents, and their families. I've worked on both sides of the spectrum. I worked with lower SES, which is socioeconomic status, families in like inner city Atlanta, inner city metro Atlanta, which, um, we're talking about like a lot might be on food stamps, with um, don't have food a lot of times. You know, not the best environments, not the best school system. Actually, Atlanta City schools, that there was a lot of issues that went on a few years ago with those schools. Um, and then I did private practice for a while, and I was on the affluent side of families. There's a place right outside of Atlanta called Peachtree City, and it's called the Bubble. It was actually a planned community, and a lot of the pilots from Delta live there. So it's a very affluent community. But I saw both things. The basic needs are met, but not the emotional needs, not the love and the belonging. As you get kind of further along, they make sure those basic needs of, we're going to make sure you have food, shelter, and that looks differently on both sides, sure. But, we're going to make sure you have that, but both checked out in different ways. One side might be checked out because they're working 3 or 4 jobs to make sure that they have enough. The other side might be checked out because they also work a lot, but then they also have their kids in 5, 6, 7, 8 activities. But they both lack the emotional connection with their kids, but they can't put it together that that's what's going on, and they blame the kids for the kids acting out. And it's just really sad because they bring their kid in and they're like, fix my kid, but then they're very checked out and they don't want, they don't want to do anything, but then they get upset if you don't fix their kid. But that just shows you how important it is to also have your emotional needs met. Those are just as important as those basic, those base needs, as we say. Yeah, so a lot of times if those aren't met, then those patterns of, okay, let me seek out unhealthy relationships. I need to be with someone. I'm actually reading a book right now about emotionally immature parents and how that leaves this feeling of emotional loneliness throughout your life, and then that affects your relationships as you go on in your life. A lot of times, either seeking out similar people in your relationships, but you still have this feeling of loneliness because you're not connecting. You still feel that emptiness.
Is that book Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents?
Yes, it is.
I've had that suggested my way. I haven't looked at it. Are you finding it rewarding?
I've only read the first chapter, and I was
Okay.
like, holy crap. Like, yeah, it's good. And it's I mean, I would say it's an easy read. I've not found it like clinical. I mean, it's written for anyone. I don't think she's written it in a way that's hard to understand. So yeah, I would recommend it, especially if you come from a home where you found it hard to connect to your parents. You felt that sense of loneliness. Maybe didn't quite understand why, because as kids we don't. Oftentimes as kids we are like, what's wrong with me? So yeah, I do recommend it.
Uh,
Um,
I do want to ask you something as a mental health professional, and we were just talking about the hierarchy of needs. You were talking about safety and security and physical needs. It seems like society and government has a pretty good idea of what it takes to provide things like safety. Like, for example, we know what a safe neighborhood looks like in terms of crime and in terms of infrastructure. We don't necessarily provide these things, the actual mechanic, but we know what the goal is. And when it comes to physiological needs, we know what nutrition looks like. We know what healthcare looks like. Again, actually getting there is still a different conversation. But I often wonder, what do we even know what it looks like to be emotionally healthy and to have your emotional needs met? Or is that still a case of we don't even know what the goal looks like a lot of times.
Do you mean we as in just anyone, or we more?
I'd say at least culturally as a society and Western society. But if you want to get specifically and talk about, the actual U.S. government, that's okay too. But just we as in the people that we're talking about in this conversation.
Um, Government definitely not.
Mhm.
um, People too, I would say we're getting better, but yeah, no. I mean, I think it depends on where you come from, like your upbringing. And I think we're talking about things more. There are great initiatives like May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So, like the Mental Health Coalition has been posting these daily questions, and the whole point is it's like hashtag care to ask. So it's to help. I think they said like 34% of people, um, only 34% of U.S. adult Americans ask for help when they need it. That means 60, what is that? 60, whatever percent, over 60 something percent don't ask for help when they need it. So
That's
that's,
really where I was going with this is that I feel like if I were to pick 10 random adults in my life, maybe three would actually know what they even want when they say emotional needs being met. They would
I,
have a rational answer to that question.
I agree with you. And I've really noticed this since I've been on dating apps. So many people put on there that they want someone who's emotionally intelligent. And then you speak with them and they clearly are not it. And I try to think, is this just me because I have emotional intelligence? Like this, and this isn't just because I'm in the field. Like you can meet people who are in the field and don't know what they're doing. Um, but I've also done a lot of my own work on myself. I mean, I have childhood trauma. I've done a lot of work for probably 14 years. When I started becoming a counselor, all my stuff started coming up. So I was like, oh crap, got to start working on this stuff. So I think people think when they know about emotions that they're emotionally intelligent.
Mm.
But there's actually this is my next idea for a guided journal. I want to do like for lack of a better term, like a beginner's guide to emotional intelligence. I want to actually like break it down into, like, I saw an info graph on, like, there's 6 levels of emotional intelligence. So obviously there's the cognitive aspect of understanding emotional intelligence, but you also need to be able to emote, to be able to experience it and express it. You need to be able to communicate. There's different areas of emotional intelligence. And I don't think people quite understand it because emotional intelligence has become a pop culture term,
Hmm.
just as other terms have become very popular and they're just used in our lay language. So, yes, I don't think, and also I've noticed people do not know how to communicate um, at all. It's just, I'm a very clear, direct communicator. I mean, I could lay it all out, and people, it's just like, I don't know how more clear I could be for you. It's just, it's really sad. And some people, I mean, they're working on it, but some people are just going through life, and I'm like, I don't know how you're functioning because it's just,
Yeah.
I just, yeah.
The problem when something becomes a pop culture word is that it essentially becomes whatever the person wants it to be at that moment. I would say the word toxic has kind of fallen into that usage now, where it is simply
Yes.
something you don't like for whatever reason, and the actual meaning behind it just becomes blurred. But I mean, to try to show how much of a range we have on emotional intelligence. Back in episode 113, I talked to my good buddy Jared Alberic, and he actually has taught courses in emotional intelligence from a leadership perspective, saying, you cannot reasonably have a position of leadership unless you understand what the people you're depending on are going through. And I don't mean just what they're expected to do for their job or for their purpose. you need to know what's going on in their head and recognize when they don't have what they need and when
I,
maybe that you need to kind of fill that gap.
I've seen that a lot because I've been considering doing kind of leadership track at work, and there are a lot of courses on that emotional intelligence and leadership because a lot of leaders lack that. So I actually have seen there's a big gap in emotional intelligence in the workplace. I feel like, and there's also a big gap in school systems. And these are just a few areas that I've really thought like, oh, I should create curriculums for these, you know. Um, and obviously they'd have to be adapted to fit those areas, like how you're going to be emotionally intelligent in a personal relationship is going to be different than how you might be in a professional, you know, relationship. The words you use and or the level of the boundaries and closeness and things like that. But and there's always, you know, you have to be politically correct, and there's legal aspects involved when you're involved um, on a corporate level and things like that. But yeah, and also another word I don't like is toxic positivity.
Mm-hmm.
That one's become really big. And I also don't like that, like, let's normalize that. People use that a lot too.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of those words that I never quite got what was meant by it, because to me, normalizing something isn't something you consciously do. It's something that kind of happens for good or for ill, and you just deal with the consequences.
Yeah. Like, doesn't it kind of negate that when you ask people to do that?
Yes, it does.
Like
Exactly. That's what I'm getting at.
it takes away the normalizing of it. I don't know. It's just a weird concept. It also makes me very oppositional. Like,
Mm-hmm.
don't tell me to do something. If I want to make something normal in my life or make it a
Mm-hmm.
part of my life, I will, but don't tell me to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Like, don't tell me to watch something because I'm probably not gonna watch it. I'll watch it when I'm ready to watch it.
Well, let's talk about watching stuff for a minute here, because you and I met through Trek Twitter.
Yes,
And we've been following each other for quite a while. I always enjoy your contributions. Can I assume that you've seen all of Picard?
I have seen all of Picard. I'm
Okay.
behind on everything else, but I did finish Picard.
Okay. Especially with what happened in Picard, I feel like Brent Spiner playing the Data adjacent characters has become a metaphor for generational trauma. Because when you consider it, Data is like the only, out of all those people, he's like the one who's well adjusted after a lot of effort, after a big journey and making a lot of mistakes. And his brother's a screw up. His father was a psychopath. His father was like trying to get away from the bad habits and failing. His grandfather was a psychopath. His great grandfather was, I mean, we can go on and on. It's just Data just becomes like the one that managed to get out of the bad patterns.
I never thought of it like that, but I like that analogy. And then you think about how they integrated lore in him, and
Mm-hmm.
then um how that wound up, like, he needed that to be able to become his like full self, with self actualized, I guess. Like
Okay.
he always wanted to be full and to be human, and he lacks that ability, and he always, even though like he couldn't emote that, he
Mm-hmm.
still longed for it in his way, and he needed to, I guess, merge or whatever with lore to be able to have that, because lore had it but he didn't. And yeah, like he almost like went to the dark side, so to speak. But that's very shadow work. I don't know if you've ever heard of Jungian archetypes.
I know
Carl
the
Jung,
words, but help me out
yeah.
here.
So Carl Jung worked under Freud, and he believed in archetypes. And like we have a shadow self, which is basically like our dark impulses. And the whole idea of it is to embrace your shadow self, because when we tend to repress them and not deal with them is when they come out in negative ways. Like you can, if you push down your passions, like passion isn't a bad thing. But when we push it down and we don't allow ourselves to have that in our lives, that's when it can become negative, or it can become what I'm looking for, like unhealthy. Um, so it's just about it's like the yin and yang kind of thing, you know. It's about recognizing that we all have the light and the shadow. And so data was the light, data. I always do that. And then lore is the dark, the shadow.
Way to go, Pulaski.
I know, right? I heard myself say it and I was like, oh man.
I couldn't not call you on it. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I called myself on it. But yeah, I really like that analogy. I like that. I like that a lot.
It's one of those cases where I really have to ask if it's intended or if I'm just reading too much into it, and I'm okay with that either way. But I've just been enjoying that ride so much. Because
Yeah,
every time you find a data relative, it's like, wow, you're more screwed up than the last one.
it's so hard to know if they do things like Doctor. Okay, I know we're Trekkies, but Doctor Who, I feel like is very intentional with what they do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you watch Doctor Who, but like
I've tried.
okay, so the new season, like I'm one episode behind, but you can tell they're hitting on some stuff, and they don't spell it out for you, but I just feel like it seems a little more obvious with Doctor Who, but it also doesn't feel like they're like pushing it down your throat, you know, like you have to believe this. Whereas with Trek, like sometimes it's a little harder to know if it's just like which might be what they want. They might want you to take what you need from it, which I think is great too. Like
Yeah.
how you interpret data in the lore situation could be different from how Susie Q does. You know, or like I know a lot of queer people interpret certain relationships differently than how cis people would.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that because we see what we need to see and relate how we need to relate um, to characters. And I think that's showcasing good writing and good acting, good producing. And I do think that last season the last two seasons really of Picard were really, really good. Terry Metalis is really awesome, the showrunner. Now Discovery, I'm behind on that one. I haven't started this new season.
I've started it. I'm going very slowly just because I know this is all there's going to be, so I might as well just savor it while it's here because when it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would say I like Discovery, and I really like Sonequa because she was in The Walking Dead.
Mm-hmm.
So when I heard she was coming to Star Trek, I was like, oh my God, one, new Star Trek, but two, I love her. So yay. But I would say out of all the new ones, it's my least favorite.
I had kind of the opposite experience because I was speculating at the end of the last season of what the season meant. I was trying to think big about it, and I was actually just going with why it affected me the way it did and why I enjoyed it when I did really enjoy it. And I said, well, I feel like it's an analogy for how the fans have re-accepted the show after a 12-year hiatus and how it had to change. And basically that, you know, in the time, all of us fans had found each other on social media, just like you and I have right here. I mean, this conversation wouldn't be happening if that hadn't happened. And one of the showrunners saw it on Twitter and was like, that's great, but no. And I'm like, they were so glad I'd read that into it, and they were so glad that I thought that way. Like that wasn't really what we were going for at all. I'm like, that's okay. I don't have to be right. It just I thought it worked well, and I'm okay with just having a good thought.
But also, that's how you needed to see it, and that's
exactly. Mm-hmm.
That's what you needed from that at that time, and that's the great thing about Star Trek, I think, and other good shows. But Star Trek is, I think it's just unique in itself. And I really hate that Trek Twitter kind of fizzled because we were all really, it was really helpful during the pandemic, and like I've actually gotten to meet a few people in person.
Same.
Yeah, like I went in, it was January or February. I went up to Chicago and I met Kelly and Graham, which Kelly is weird kidda something, and Graham is Barnacle, Fear Barnacle, something like
Mhm.
that. I can't even remember all the names now, but I left Twitter, I think, before a lot of people did, because I just felt like it was time for me to leave. But I mean, I'm still friends with a lot of you guys on other, like, Instagram and Facebook, so I'm
Yeah,
glad. I was just gonna say I'm glad that I feel like, a lot of times you meet people online and it's very superficial and you don't stay in contact with people or actually form actual relationships.
mhm.
But I feel like with our community, we all have, not all of us, but a lot of us have, and I really like that.
I'm just going to throw this out there, and I'm speaking only for myself, but I kind of feel like at least you are on board, and the people I talk to on a regular basis are on board. I will always respect your privacy and your boundaries. I will never insert myself into any part of your life that you don't want me there. But when I say, hey, I consider you my friend, I do mean that. I do think very highly of you. I want to know that you're okay. I care about what you care about. I want to know, basically how your day is going. And that means something to me when people do share that information with me. I don't just say, oh, great, I got a tweet. That's cool. No, it's like, oh, hey, so and so's having a good day. That makes my day a little bit better.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's probably one reason I left, though, because it kind of started to feel like it wasn't as genuine and there was some, like, drama going on,
Say no more.
between people. So, yeah, I just, it was just time to move on. But like I said, I mean, the people that I clicked with, and I feel like we're more of the quality people, like you and Johnny, and there's a guy named Kevin who's also, he read my book and, like, did some editing as well, like you did. Have all been really supportive. Neil left before I did, like way before I did. But like, I mean, more of you guys have bought my book than like, I mean, we all support each other too. I've noticed, like, when we all have stuff going on, we've supported each other, which I think is really great. Which is how Star Trek is, right?
I agree. That's very much true. And honestly, I consider this community. I try to support what my friends are doing. I try to boost awareness of it. And I appreciate when you've done that for me. It's always gone noticed. So, yeah, when you're putting out something quality, you're trying to help people hear it. I always want to help people help people.
Yeah, definitely. Which I just want to explain how the book's set up real quick because I didn't
Please.
get to do that. So it's set up based on the levels of the hierarchy. So in the beginning, I explain about the hierarchy of needs, which I've already done. And then each section has like 10 journal prompts. So the first section is about physiological needs, and it has prompts based on those, all the way up: safety, love and belonging, on and all the way up to the transcendence need. The cool thing is, and some people told me this is their favorite part, I created Spotify music lists to go with them. So, and they're not all like happy, lovey songs. Like, I tried to pick songs that um, fit the spectrum of. So, if we're talking safety, I put songs in there that might reflect not feeling safe, but also songs that reflect feeling safe and comfortable. Same with self-esteem, love and belonging. I tried to pick songs that reflected how that feels, like in a positive way, but also how it feels when you don't have that. Because one, that's going to require you to feel that, which a lot of people avoid the uncomfortable. We don't like the uncomfortable, but the thing is, in avoiding the uncomfortable, you don't feel the awesome stuff either. You have to feel the uncomfortable to be able to get through stuff. So yeah, so each section has its own wish list. It has a QR code you can scan. It goes straight to my playlist. And then at the end, it's got, I created like a checklist. This wasn't in there when you looked at it, but it has when you can check off what you've done, because you don't have to go through it section by section. Like, you might feel like, okay, I don't want to do this section right now. I want to do a couple in this one, a couple in another one. And then in the very back, because I'm like, I can't talk about certain things and expect people to know them. I know about cognitive distortions because I'm a therapist, or I know about defense mechanisms because I'm a therapist. So in the back, there's probably like, maybe I wound up with 7, 9 appendices. Uh, and there's one on cognitive distortion. There's one on coping skills, defense mechanisms, feelings words, mental health resources. And I tried to put as many countries in there as I could that I could find. Positive affirmations, how to write those for yourself. Um, Thinking hats. So it's like just how to do critical thinking. And then there's also some blank pages in the back that I added. And then throughout the book, there's quotes because I love quotes. I feel like quotes help us think about things, help us feel. I've written down quotes since I was like in middle school or high school. I always liked when I would read something and it felt like, whoa, that person knows exactly what I'm thinking or feeling. It made me feel not so alone. So, and that's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, the best thing about your book, in addition to the fact that you have put so many great resources in there, directing people as to where they can learn more about these concepts or get help if they feel they need it, if they've gone through even just a little part of your book and done some of the exercises and read just some of the material, they have a great basis for talking to themselves about what's really going on, how they're really feeling about stuff, starting to see where the problem is. And this is a really great thing if they choose to do so, to take it to a good friend and ask a second opinion, or take it to a mental health professional and really start an actual professional healing journey if that's what they feel they need to do. This is a great starting point, just to feel like you said, you're not alone. Somebody else is going through this and there's a way forward.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm still kind of like, whoa, I can't believe I made a book. It's called cognitive dissonance when your brain hasn't quite caught up. That's a term for you. And I'm just like, wow, I can't believe I made that, but I'm really proud of it. I think it's something I would do too. If I were looking for a book, and some people have told me that they feel like it's not fluff, where a lot of guided journals can be um, like have a lot of fluffy extra stuff. They feel like it's to the point and well organized, which I like.
It's great for there to be fluff if it's the kind of subject where fluff is germane. I mean, if it's a book about your taste in music, or how you spent your teenage years, or what you want to do when you grow, there are places for those kinds of conversations. But trying to come to terms with the fact that you're a wildflower, and maybe you didn't want to be a wildflower, but you are now, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Those are more heavy conversations, and you don't want fluff in that.
Makes sense. Yeah. And I was trying to think like of a journal maybe I've seen that would have been fluff, and I can't say I don't know to think about one, but maybe something like that if it's I don't know, like,
Spend more time on Etsy, you'll find them.
okay, we'll see. A lot of those are what I was talking about at the beginning of this.
Mm-hmm.
People just copy and paste stuff. They don't have it. No, they don't know anything they're doing. They don't have any. Not. I'm not trying to be mean, but they don't have any kind of background in helping people with mental health. They just create these journals to sell them and make some extra money, and that can be great, but it it worries me because there's not like an ethic to that, like let me just throw something together. And there's people out there that, like me, I will research stuff and I'll get an idea if something feels right or something kind of like, this isn't right for me. But a lot of people aren't like that. They see something and they're like, oh, okay, this person's saying this, so it must be right. Some people don't have that little voice inside them that says this might not be right. And that upsets me for people, especially when they're going to try to do something to help themselves.
Allison, I can't recommend your book highly enough. I'm going to go ahead and put the link to it in the show notes of my website, aaronbossig.com. Everything we talked about in this episode is going to be in there. Where can people follow you and your adventures on the internet?
So I have a professional Instagram, and believe it or not, it's u.r.among.wildflowers. Goes with the theme. So it, I post on there mental health stuff, book stuff. I'm trying to get more into writing. I want to write like some mental health rep fiction type books. I feel like people can relate to that as well. So that's pretty much the main place that you can find me.
Okay. Well, I will make sure that gets in there as well. Allison, thank you so much. I really want to have you back sometime. Maybe we can even do a face-to-face if the geography permits it. Let's get
Yeah.
together again.